The Wilson family was a name that commanded respect, or at least fear, across the business world. Their empire stretched from coast to coast, built on a foundation of ruthless tactics and calculated takeovers. They were known for their ability to sniff out struggling companies like predators circling wounded prey. To them, vulnerability wasn't something to be helped. It was an opportunity to exploit. And yet, within this fortress of wealth and power, I stood as nothing more than a shadow. Olivia, this secretary, the niece who does odd jobs, or worse, the invisible woman in the corner. For years, I had perfected the art of blending into the background, letting my relatives believe what they wanted, that I was insignificant, unworthy of their attention. But oh, how wrong they were. It was during one of those suffocating annual reunions at Aunt Patricia's sprawling mansion that everything changed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above me, casting light over designer dresses and expensive watches while the air reeked of arrogance mixed with imported perfume. I lingered near the edge of the room, sipping champagne slowly, watching my cousins boast about their latest promotions and deals. They were all executives, partners, leaders of some sort. Everyone except me, the supposed failure of the family. Then it happened. As I passed by the study, I overheard Uncle Robert speaking with his cronies, their voices dripping with disdain. "Olivia," he scoffed. "She's the only disgrace in the Wilson bloodline. A secretary? What a waste of potential." My fingers tightened around the glass in my hand, threatening to shatter it. Disgrace. Waste. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they reflected how little they thought of me. In that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger, not entirely. It was determination. A fire ignited deep within me, fueled by every insult, every condescending glance, every time they dismissed me as irrelevant. I realized then that proving them wrong wouldn't just be satisfying. It would be my life's mission. But revenge alone wasn't enough. No, I needed to dismantle their entire worldview. I would show them that success doesn't always come wrapped in tailored suits or shouted from boardroom tables. Sometimes, it hides in plain sight, quietly building an empire while others look away. That night, I made a silent vow. I would rise, not through their approval, but despite their contempt. And when the time came, I would make sure they saw exactly who I was. Not the quiet, unassuming woman they mocked, but the architect of their downfall. The memory of that family meeting still burns in my mind like an unhealed wound. It was supposed to be the moment I proved myself, the day I stepped out of their shadow and into my own light. Fresh out of business school with an MBA in hand, I had spent months perfecting my pitch, a revolutionary plan for restructuring failing companies, turning them into profitable enterprises through innovative strategies. I believed my family's vast network would be the stepping stone I needed. Instead, it became the first brick in a wall they built to shut me out. Uncle Robert sat at the head of the table, his usual smug expression plastered across his face as I presented my ideas. At first, there were polite nods, but soon the room erupted in mocking laughter. A woman running a major business? Uncle Robert sneered, leaning back in his chair as if he'd just delivered the punchline of a joke. "You're nothing but a burden to this family." The words hit me like a slap, sharp and stinging. My male cousins exchanged amused glances, while Aunt Patricia sighed dramatically, shaking her head as though she'd expected nothing less from me. But what cut deepest wasn't their ridicule, it was their dismissal. They didn't even entertain the idea of considering my proposal. Instead, Uncle Robert suggested I start at the bottom, working my way up from the mailroom like everyone else. Everyone else, of course, meant my male cousins, who were handed executive titles without question. The hypocrisy was suffocating. As I stood there, clutching my notes, I realized something crucial. They would never see me as an equal. Not here. Not under their roof. That night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. If they refused to give me a seat at their table, I would build my own, and make sure it was one they could never reach. Summit Solutions was born not just as a company, but as a declaration of independence. I rented a tiny office above a Chinese restaurant, barely able to afford the rent on my savings. But I had something more valuable than money: determination. Every late night spent drafting contracts, every early morning phone call to potential clients, every rejection letter, they fueled my resolve. I thought about Uncle Robert's words often during those early days. A woman can never run a large business. His voice echoed in my mind, not as a discouragement, but as a challenge. I vowed to prove him wrong, not just for myself, but for every woman told she wasn't enough. What they didn't know was that their ridicule had planted the seeds of my empire. And when the time came, I would make sure they saw exactly how wrong they were. Summit Solutions wasn't just a company. It was my weapon, my shield, and my silent rebellion against the empire that had dismissed me. My strategy was simple yet effective. Identify struggling companies before they became targets for hostile takeovers by the Wilson family, then step in to save them. It wasn't about profit alone. It was about dismantling their predatory practices while building something better. For years, I operated in the shadows, ensuring no one, not even my own family, suspected my involvement. Every success of Summit Solutions was a quiet victory over their greed. But there's a fine line between staying hidden and being discovered, and one night, that line nearly shattered. A desperate phone call came from Mr. Alvarez, CEO of Green Tech Manufacturing, a company we had been working tirelessly to stabilize. "They're threatening us," he said, his voice trembling. "Your uncle's people. They found out about our restructuring plan. They're pressuring creditors to call in loans early." The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. Uncle Robert wasn't just content with ruining businesses anymore. He was actively trying to sabotage mine. That night, I worked like I never had before. Locked in my office above the Chinese restaurant, the same tiny space where Summit Solutions began, I pored over financial statements, legal contracts, and creditor agreements. Hours turned into an eternity as I crafted an emergency solution, renegotiating loan terms, securing short-term funding from trusted allies, and drafting airtight legal documents to protect Green Tech from further harassment. My heart raced not only from exhaustion, but also from fear. Fear that if I slipped up, even slightly, my cover would be blown. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed, a text from Maya, my assistant. "Are you okay? You've been unreachable." I hesitated before replying. "Still working." She didn't need to know how close I was to losing everything. By dawn, I had pieced together a lifeline for Green Tech. But the real test came later that day when Uncle Robert himself called me at my day job. His voice dripped with suspicion. "Olivia, what do you know about Green Tech?" he asked casually, probing. "Nothing more than what's in the news," I replied coolly, masking the storm inside me. The incident left me shaken but more determined than ever. Every late night, every calculated move, every ounce of stress, it all fueled my resolve. If they thought I was powerless, they were wrong. And soon, they'd see just how wrong they were. Being the family's invisible secretary wasn't just a role, it was my most valuable asset. Every casual conversation, every overheard phone call, and every document left unattended became a piece of intelligence I could use to dismantle their empire from within. For years, I had perfected the art of blending into the background, listening while appearing not to listen, existing without being noticed. But there were moments when even the best-laid plans teetered on the edge of disaster. One such moment came during an impromptu family meeting at Uncle Robert's penthouse, a sleek, glass-walled fortress overlooking Manhattan. I had been summoned under the guise of taking notes, but in reality, I was there to gather information. The room buzzed with excitement as they discussed their latest target, Green Tech Manufacturing, one of the companies I'd been secretly working to save. My heart raced as I scribbled down details about their hostile takeover strategy, details that would allow me to fortify Green Tech's defenses. But then it happened. As I reached for another sheet of paper, I accidentally knocked over a stack of files. A single document slipped out of my bag, a confidential Summit Solutions contract with Green Tech's logo stamped boldly across the top. Time seemed to freeze. I felt the blood drain from my face as I bent down to retrieve it, praying no one had noticed. But Aunt Patricia's sharp eyes caught the movement. "What's that?" she asked, her tone icy. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Oh, nothing," I said lightly, clutching the document to my chest. "Just some administrative work." Her gaze lingered suspiciously, and I knew I needed to act fast. Faking a grimace, I clutched my stomach. "Actually, I don't feel so well. Must be something I ate." Without waiting for a response, I hurried toward the door, leaving behind the faint scent of urgency. Once outside, I locked myself in the restroom and examined the document. It was still intact, but my hands trembled as I realized how close I'd come to exposure. I quickly snapped a photo of the pages I'd taken notes on, deleted any trace of them from my phone, and shoved the physical copies deep into my bag. When I returned 5 minutes later, feigning recovery, Uncle Robert barely glanced at me. He was too engrossed in his grand plans to notice the quiet woman refilling his coffee. That night, I lay awake replaying the scene in my mind. One misstep, 1 second of hesitation, and everything could have unraveled. But instead, I had turned their arrogance into my advantage. They dismissed me because they believed I was powerless. And that belief, it was my greatest weapon. The moment I stepped into the conference room, I could feel the weight of a decade's worth of secrets pressing against my chest. Today was the day everything would change. For me, for them, and for Summit Solutions. Gone was the simple black dress that had once been my armor. In its place was a tailored navy blue suit, sharp enough to cut through their arrogance. But it wasn't just my appearance that would shock them. As I entered, I carried with me something far more devastating. A video compilation of every condescending remark, every dismissive laugh, every insult they had thrown at me over the years. The room fell silent as I connected my laptop to the projector. Uncle Robert sat at the head of the table, flanked by Ethan and James, his usual air of superiority radiating off him like a toxic cloud. Aunt Patricia adjusted her pearls, clearly expecting this meeting to go in their favor. None of them noticed Maya slip quietly behind me, her presence reassuring but unnecessary. I had prepared for this moment for 10 years. "Let's begin," I said calmly, pressing play on the video. The screen lit up with clips from family gatherings, board meetings, and casual conversations. There was Uncle Robert scoffing. "A woman can never run a large business." Ethan chiming in, "She'll never amount to anything." And Aunt Patricia's cutting remark, "You're wasting your potential." Their voices filled the room, echoing harshly against the polished walls. The silence that followed was deafening. When the video ended, I stood up slowly, locking eyes with each member of my family. "For 10 years, I began, my voice cold and steady. I've listened to you tell me who I am, or rather, who you thought I was. Today, I'm here to show you who I really am." I paused, letting the tension build. "I am not just the CEO of Summit Solutions. I am the person who has dismantled every single one of your hostile takeovers. Every plan you made, every company you tried to destroy, I stopped them." Uncle Robert's face turned an alarming shade of red, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "This is impossible," he spat, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's not impossible," I replied, stepping closer. "It's justice. You built your empire on greed and exploitation. I built mine on resilience and strategy. And now, your empire answers to me." The room remained frozen, their stunned expressions confirming what I already knew. They had underestimated me for the last time. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, the Wilson family's empire had crumbled under the weight of my revelation. Their once unshakable control over their business ventures shifted entirely into my hands. Summit Solutions now held the reins, dictating terms that forced them to abandon their predatory practices and focus on ethical restructuring. For a family that thrived on dominance and exploitation, this was nothing short of humiliation. Uncle Robert, predictably, refused to go quietly. In his rage, he began frantically calling old business partners, attempting to cancel contracts with Summit Solutions in a desperate bid to regain some semblance of power. But I had anticipated his every move. Maya, ever loyal and resourceful, alerted me the moment he picked up the phone. "He's trying to reach Harrison," she reported calmly. "Already blocked," I replied, sipping tea from my favorite blend, sourced exclusively from the vineyard I owned. It wasn't enough to simply stop him. I wanted to ensure he understood just how powerless he truly was. That evening, I released a carefully curated dossier to the press. Years' worth of evidence detailing Uncle Robert's unethical dealings. Insider trading, illegal mergers, and even bribes to regulators were laid bare for the world to see. The headlines exploded overnight. Wilson family empire built on lies. Robert Wilson's dirty secrets exposed. His reputation, once untouchable, disintegrated before our eyes. At the next family gathering, a somber affair hosted in Summit Solutions conference room, he sat silently, his usual arrogance replaced by a defeated slump. Meanwhile, other family members scrambled to mend fences. Aunt Patricia sent me an overly sweet email, claiming she always believed in me. Ethan called repeatedly, leaving voicemails filled with hollow apologies. James even showed up at my office unannounced, proposing a partnership between Wilson Ventures and Summit Solutions. We could dominate the market together, he suggested nervously. I dismissed him without hesitation. Summit doesn't dominate, I said coldly. We elevate. Their attempts to win me over were laughable, but they weren't surprising. After years of dismissing me as insignificant, they couldn't comprehend that I no longer needed or cared for their approval. Every message they sent only reinforced what I already knew. They were grasping at straws, clinging to the remnants of their shattered empire. And as I watched them flounder, I felt not anger, but satisfaction. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about dismantling their toxic legacy and replacing it with something better. The aftermath of my revelation rippled through the business world like a tidal wave. Overnight, I became both a symbol and a spectacle, proof that power could be wielded differently, more ethically. Summit Solutions wasn't just a company anymore. It was a movement. Journalists flocked to interview me, eager to dissect how a quiet secretary had dismantled one of America's most ruthless dynasties. At first, their questions were predictable. How does it feel to destroy your family's empire? Or was this all about revenge? But then came the question that lingered in every room I entered. Do you think you went too far with revenge? A young reporter asked during a press conference, her voice trembling slightly as cameras clicked around us. The room fell silent, everyone waiting for my response. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze steadily. This isn't revenge, I said, letting the weight of my words settle over the crowd. Revenge is destruction. What I've done is construction. I taught them, and anyone watching, that real strength lies in building, not breaking. My voice softened but carried an edge. For years, they dismissed me because I didn't fit their mold of success. Now, I'm showing the world that success doesn't have to look like theirs. That same day, I announced the launch of the Olivia Wilson Scholarship Fund, a program dedicated to supporting young women pursuing careers in business. Funded by a portion of Summit Solutions profits, the scholarship would provide mentorship, financial aid, and opportunities for women who refuse to compromise their values. These women won't need to play small or hide who they are, I declared at the announcement event. They'll know from the start that their potential is limitless. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very family that had once mocked me now scrambled to align themselves with my legacy. Aunt Patricia tried to claim credit for my success in interviews, while Ethan awkwardly attended networking events hoping to reconnect. I ignored their attempts, focusing instead on nurturing the next generation of leaders. In private moments, I thought about the countless women who had reached out, those who had been told they weren't smart enough, ambitious enough, or strong enough. Their stories fueled my resolve to keep pushing boundaries. As I stood on stage accepting another award months later, I looked out at the audience filled with scholarship recipients, employees, and allies. Success isn't measured by how much you take, I said, my voice ringing clear. It's measured by how much you give back. Behind me, a slideshow displayed images of Summit Solutions projects, thriving businesses, empowered employees, and communities transformed. For the first time in my life, I felt truly unstoppable, not because I had defeated my family, but because I had built something unshakable. The final press conference was held in the same grand ballroom where I had once been dismissed as just a secretary. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the air buzzed with anticipation. For years, I had operated in silence, building my empire while the Wilson family basked in their own spotlight. Now, it was my turn to step into the light, not for glory, but to deliver a lesson they would never forget. Standing at the podium, I surveyed the room, my eyes lingering on Uncle Robert, who sat stiffly in the front row. His once arrogant demeanor was replaced by a fragile tension, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as though clinging to what little dignity he had left. For years, I began, my voice steady and commanding. You taught me that power lies in staying unseen. That success is measured by how quietly you can work while others take credit. But now, I will teach you something new. Real power isn't about hiding. It's about making sure everyone sees you when it's already too late. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on me. I continued, "You underestimated me because I didn't fit your mold of success. You believed I was weak because I chose patience over aggression, strategy over arrogance. But here's the truth. I wasn't waiting for your approval. I was building something stronger than any of you could imagine. Something that doesn't rely on exploitation or greed." I paused, letting my words sink in before delivering the final blow. "Every company you tried to destroy, I saved. Every plan you made, I dismantled. And now, when you look around, you'll see that the world no longer belongs to you. It belongs to those who build, not break." With that, I raised my glass of champagne, the very vintage produced from the vineyard Uncle Robert had once boasted about owning. "To lessons learned," I said with a cold smile, "and to those who teach them." The irony was not lost on him. His face flushed red as the reporters erupted into applause. As I stepped away from the podium, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that success doesn't need to shout to be heard. It can grow quietly, patiently, until its roots are unshakable. And when the time comes, it doesn't just demand attention. It commands respect.